Hello and welcome to 221B Baker Street Tales, where every story feels like a conversation over a warm cup of coffee. Tonight the fog presses thick against the windows and a tale of ink, blood, and buried secrets waits to be told. Settle in, dear listener. The game is afoot. Chapter 1. The Midnight Caller. It was a night in late October, one of those nights when London seems to shrink beneath the weight of its own fog, when the very air clings to the skin like damp wool and the gas lamps burn with a sullen, jaundiced glow. I, John H. Watson, M.D., late of the Indian Army, had settled into my customary armchair at 221B Baker Street with a copy of The Lancet open upon my knee. Though I confess the intricacies of Dr. Bell's latest treatise on cranial trauma were losing the battle against the soporific warmth of the fire. Across from me, Sherlock Holmes reclined in his mouse-colored dressing gown, his long legs stretched toward the fender, his violin lying idle across his lap like a sleeping cat. The clock upon the mantel had just chimed the quarter-hour past 11 when the silence was shattered by a knock so violent that it seemed the very door must splinter. I started upright, scattering the journal to the rug. Holmes, however, did not move save for the slight elevation of one eyebrow. "Midnight callers are rarely social, Watson," he murmured, his voice as calm as if he were remarking upon the weather. "Let us see what desperation wears tonight." Before I could frame a reply, the measured tread of Mrs. Hudson ascended the stair, accompanied by the agitated murmur of a stranger's voice. Our good landlady appeared in the doorway, her mob cap slightly askew, her usually placid countenance touched with alarm. "A gentleman to see you, Mr. Holmes," she announced, "and in a rare taking, if I may say so. He would give no card, only that the matter was one of life and death." Holmes waved a languid hand. "Show him up, Mrs. Hudson, and pray bring a fresh pot of coffee. I perceive our visitor has not slept in some days." The stranger who entered a moment later was a man of perhaps 35, tall and well-made, though the elegance of his tailor could not disguise the ravages of anxiety. His top hat, still clutched in one gloved hand, dripped steadily onto our Persian rug, forming a small, dark pool that reflected the firelight. His face was parchment pale beneath a neatly trimmed beard of auburn, and his eyes, gray, I noted, and uncommonly large, darted about the room as though expecting pursuit. When he spoke, his voice cracked like a schoolboy's. "Mr. Sherlock Holmes?" He took one involuntary step forward, then checked himself. "I am Reginald Vale, junior partner at Coots & Vale, solicitors, Threadneedle Street. I apologize for the hour, but the matter will not wait upon the sun." Holmes had risen with that feline grace which characterized his every movement, and now stood with his back to the fire, his keen eyes fixed upon our visitor's face. "Pray be seated, Mr. Vale," he said, indicating the basket chair opposite my own. "You have the look of a man who has outrun the hounds of hell. Watson, the brandy." I hastened to the tantalus while Vale sank into the chair as though his legs had betrayed him. He accepted the glass with trembling fingers, drank deeply, and then, somewhat steadied, drew from his inner pocket a small morocco case, which he laid upon the occasional table with the reverence of a priest handling the sacrament. "3 nights ago," he began, "my senior partner, Mr. Ebenezer Coutts, vanished from his locked study at the firm. This morning we found him." He opened the case. Within, upon a bed of black velvet, lay a single sheet of heavy cream-laid paper, the kind used by the Bank of England for its most confidential correspondence. Across it, in bold black ink that seemed still wet, sprawled the words, "Your secrets are mine. Pay or perish." Beneath the message, executed with crude but unmistakable intent, was the sketch of a coffin, its lid thrown back, empty, waiting. I felt the old familiar thrill course through my veins, the same sensation that had gripped me upon the battlefields of Maiwand when the bugle sounded the charge. Holmes, however, merely leaned forward, his long fingers steepled beneath his chin. "Blackmail, extortion, and, unless I miss my guess, murder," he said softly. "Pray continue, Mr. Vale. Omit nothing, however trivial it may seem." Vale passed a hand across his brow. The study door was bolted from within, the windows barred since the Fenian scare of '87. No sign of struggle, yet Ebenezer lay dead at his desk, a bullet through the temple. The pistol, his own, was clutched in his right hand. The police, in the person of Inspector Lestrade, have pronounced it suicide. But this note, his voice dropped to a whisper. And the ink, Mr. Holmes, the ink vanished. By the time Lestrade arrived, scarce an hour after discovery, the words were gone, leaving only this blank sheet. He turned the paper toward us. It was indeed innocent of any mark save the faint pressure of the pen that had once written there. Holmes's eyes glittered like steel in the firelight. He took the sheet between thumb and forefinger, holding it first to the lamp, then to the heat of the flames. For a moment, nothing. Then, as delicately as breath upon glass, the message began to reappear. First the coffin, then the words, blooming in a sickly lemon yellow. "Sympathetic ink," I exclaimed. "Gallic acid and ferrous sulfate developed by heat." "Precisely, Watson." Holmes's voice held a note of satisfaction. The blackmailer intended the message to manifest post-mortem, dramatic theater for the benefit of the discoverer. But we shall spoil his performance. He laid the paper carefully upon the table and turned to Vale. "Describe the room. Every detail." Vale closed his eyes, as though seeing it still. "Ebenezer's study is at the rear of the building, overlooking the alley. Mahogany desk, green-shaded lamp, portrait of his late wife above the mantel. The safe, Chubb's patent, stands in the corner. The carpet is turkey, crimson, and blue. The windows—" He shuddered. "The windows have not been opened since the great smog of '82. The sashes are painted shut." "And the pistol?" "A Webley Mark Warren's Army issue. Ebenezer served in the Crimea, captain in the 11th Hussars. Kept it in his center drawer, loaded since the burglary of '89. I could not resist interjecting. "The wound, may I ask its nature?" "Contact shot to the right temple, powder tattooing extensive. The bullet exited and embedded in the ceiling plaster." "Classic suicide, Dr. Watson, or so the police surgeon declared." Holmes had begun to pace, his dressing gown swirling about his ankles like smoke. "Yet you, Mr. Vale, are not convinced. Ebenezer was not the man to take his own life. He had plans, a merger with bearings that would have made us the preeminent firm in the city. And then there is the matter of the Ledyard Trust." He broke off, as though realizing he had said too much. Holmes pounced. "The Ledyard Trust. Pray enlighten us." Vale hesitated, then seemed to come to a decision. "A charitable foundation, ostensibly for the improvement of Whitechapel slums. Ebenezer administered it personally. There were irregularities, whispers of misappropriation. He was to present the accounts to the trustees on Monday next." "And you feared exposure?" "He feared nothing, but I—" Vale's hands clenched. "I had access to the ledgers. If anything were amiss, suspicion would fall upon me as junior partner." Holmes stopped pacing. "You will furnish me with copies of these ledgers. Also a plan of the premises, including any subterranean passages. Old smuggler tunnels are not unknown in the city. Watson, your service revolver, we shall require it." I stared. "Tonight? Threadneedle Street is but a step. The scent is fresh. Delay would be fatal." Vale rose unsteadily. "There is one more thing. This afternoon, a second note arrived. Identical paper, identical ink, though this time the message was visible from the first." He drew from his waistcoat a smaller sheet, folded twice. "It was pushed beneath the door of my private office. No one saw the messenger. Holmes unfolded it with care. The message was brief. One down. Your turn approaches. The Ledyard Trust will not save you. Beneath, the same coffin sketch, though this time a tiny figure lay within, arms crossed upon its breast. I felt the chill of the grave. Good God, Holmes. The murderer is among us still. Precisely. Holmes's smile was wintry, and he mistakes terror for submission. Mr. Vale, you will return home. Lock your doors, admit no one. Watson and I will examine the scene before the trail grows colder. As Vale departed, his footsteps echoing hollowly down the stair, Holmes stood at the window watching the fog swallow the hansom cab. Observe, Watson, he said softly. The perfect night for murder. The streets are empty, the constables huddled in their boxes, the very mist a conspirator. Yet our quarry has made his first mistake. Which is? He has involved me. He turned from the window, his eyes alight with that fierce joy I knew so well. Come, Watson. The game is afoot, and the board is set with pieces more deadly than ivory. I fetched my revolver from the drawer, checked the cylinders, and donned my ulster. As we descended to the street, the fog closed about us like a living thing. And somewhere in its depths, a church bell tolled the half hour. The hunt had begun. Chapter 2. The Vanishing Ink. The fog had thinned to a sour yellow haze by the time our growler deposited us before the somber facade of Coutts and Vale solicitors in Threadneedle Street. Dawn was still an hour away. The great banks slept like stone lions, and only the ravens of the Royal Exchange stirred upon the cornices. A single constable paced before the door, his bull's-eye lantern cutting a tunnel through the murk. He touched his helmet when he recognized Holmes, though his glance at my bulging pocket was wary. "Mr. Holmes, sir. Inspector Lestrade's inside, says you're expected." Holmes gave a curt nod, and we passed beneath the brass plate that read, in severe Roman capitals, Coutts and Vale, East on 1784. The hall smelled of beeswax, old leather, and something metallic, blood, I realized with a start. A chalk outline upon the turkey carpet marked where Ebenezer Coutts had fallen. The desk stood at the far end, beneath a portrait of the founder in powdered wig and stern countenance. The green banker's lamp still burned, though its wick had sunk low. Lestrade emerged from the shadows, his ferret face pinched with fatigue. "Suicide. Plain as print," he declared, though his eyes slid to Holmes with the old mixture of defiance and hope. Door bolted inside, window barred, pistol in the deceased's hand. Powder burns on the temple. What more do you want? "The truth, Inspector," Holmes replied, already upon his knees with the magnifying lens. "Which is rarely plain, and never simple." He moved across the carpet with the slow precision of a surveyor, glass tracing every fiber. I noted the details as he muttered them. No mud from the alley. No ash save the Egyptian cigarettes in the tray. Ebenezer's brand. No scuff marks upon the desk legs. Curious. Vale hovered in the doorway, his face the color of putty. "The pistol, Mr. Holmes, it is there upon the blotter." The Webley lay where it had fallen, its walnut grip dark with blood. I lifted it carefully, sniffed the barrel. One round fired within the hour of death. The angle... Awkward, Holmes finished. For a right-handed man to shoot his right temple at such a downward trajectory, unless he were a contortionist. Lestrade snorted. Men in despair do strange things. Holmes ignored him, his attention fixed upon the blotter. A faint rectangular stain marred the green leather, darker at one corner as though something had rested there and absorbed the damp. He produced the note from his pocket, laid it atop the stain. The dimensions matched exactly. "Here the message lay," he said. "Warm from the lamp, perhaps, or the heat of the body. Watson, your notebook." I tore a sheet, scribbled the blackmail in hurried pencil, then held it above the spirit lamp that stood upon the mantel. The words bloomed like ghosts. "Your secrets are mine. Pay or perish." The coffin beneath them grinned in lemon yellow. "Gallic acid and ferrous sulfate," Holmes announced. "Developed by heat." The blackmailer intended the message to reappear for the discoverer, post-mortem theater. But the room cooled. The ink slept until now. Lestrade peered over his shoulder, scowling. "Clever trick. Doesn't change the bolt on the door." Holmes's smile was thin. "We shall address the bolt presently. First, the safe." The chub stood open, its contents untouched. Bundles of deeds, a velvet box of diamonds, the Ledyard trust ledger bound in red morocco. Holmes lifted the ledger with reverence, turned to the final page. A fresh entry in Ebenezer's spidery hand, 15 oct. Paid JH $500, final warning. Beneath a marginal note in different ink, Brown hurried, he knows. Holmes's eyes narrowed. JH, the initials recur in earlier payments. Vale, who is JH? Our client paled further. Josiah Hargrove, former clerk, dismissed 6 months ago for irregularities, rumored to have drowned in the Thames. Rumors, Holmes said softly, are the mulch in which truth sprouts. And this brown ink, sepia, not the blackmailer's black. Ebenezer wrote it after the note arrived in haste. He recognized his tormentor. He closed the ledger, tucked it beneath his arm. Watson, the windows. I examined the sashes, painted shut as Vale had said, the putty cracked with age, no scratches upon the bars. The room was a vault. Yet the murderer entered and departed, Holmes mused. The bolt was thrown from within, witnessed by Vale and the charwoman. Ergo, a means of locking from without. He knelt again, this time at the wainscot. His fingers traced the oak panels until, click, a section swung inward upon concealed hinges, revealing a narrow passage that smelled of earth and river mist. The old smuggler tunnel, Vale whispered. From the days when the firm stored bullion, I thought it bricked up. Bricks may be removed, Holmes replied, and replaced. Observe the mortar, fresh, no dust. Our murderer is a man of resource. Chapter 3. Footprints in the Fog. The passage exhaled a breath of cold river damp as we stepped through the false panel. Revolver was in my hand before I knew it. Holmes carried only the bullseye lantern he had borrowed from the constable. The tunnel narrowed at once to the width of a man's shoulders, its brick walls sweating with moisture and patched with pale fungi that glowed faintly like the eyes of drowned cats. The floor sloped downward in a gentle spiral, and every footfall echoed as though the city itself listened. Mind the gradient, Watson, Holmes murmured. These smugglers' runs were built for brandy casks, not gentlemen of stature. One slip and we join the bones below. I caught the glint of white amid the silt, indeed a rib cage, half buried, still laced with the remnants of a leather jerkin. The Thames had claimed its own long before the tunnel was sealed. After perhaps 50 paces, the passage leveled and widened into a cistern-like chamber. Iron rungs climbed the far wall to a manhole cover. Holmes's light swept the floor, a confusion of prints, boots, bare feet, the claw marks of rats, but one set stood clear. Heavy hobnails, size 9, the left heel worn to a slant. Recent, Holmes said, measuring with his tape. Within the last 12 hours. Note the sharp edges, no blurring from damp. Our man entered here, ascended to the alley, and returned the same way. He knelt, lens to the ground. Tobacco ash. Latakia, coarse cut. Not Ebenezer's brand, and here. He pinched a fiber between thumb and forefinger. Wax twine, Navy issue. Our visitor is a sailor, or was. The rungs were slick with moss, but Holmes climbed with the agility of an ape. I followed more cautiously, my army boots finding purchase where his patent leather slippers slipped. The manhole opened into the alley behind Coots and Vale, a narrow slit between cliffs of brick where the fog pooled thick as milk. Dawn had begun to pale the sky, yet the gas lamps still burned, their halos trembling in the mist. Holmes dropped to the cobbles and immediately crouched. The hobnail prince emerged from the manhole, crossed the alley in 3 strides, and vanished at a blank wall opposite. Impossible, I breathed, only to the untrained eye. Holmes's fingers traced the mortar. A rectangle of newer brick, no wider than a door, showed where the old had been replaced. He pressed. The section swung inward on oiled hinges, revealing a second tunnel, this one dry, floored with sawdust, smelling of printer's ink and coal tar. "A stationer's cellar," Holmes said. "See the crates? Wiggins and Sons, Fleet Street. Our murderer has a bolt hole within a bolt hole." The prince continued across the sawdust, past stacks of paper reams, to a wooden stair that ascended to a trap door. Holmes listened, ear to the wood, then lifted it a finger's breadth. Voices drifted down. Early workmen, the clatter of type cases. He closed it softly. "Daylight will bring witnesses. We return by the river route." We retraced our steps to the alley. The fog had lifted enough to show the full length of the passage, 20 yards of slick cobble bounded by sheer walls. No doors, no ladders, no drain pipes. The prince entered from the manhole, crossed to the stationer's wall, and nothing. No return. Holmes stood motionless, the lantern at his feet painting his face in chiaroscuro. He did not leave by the alley. Therefore he remained within the building or ascended. He played the light upward. High above, a rusty iron ladder clung to the wall of Coutts and Vale itself, leading to a small vent window just beneath the eaves. The lowest rung was 8 feet from the ground. "Impossible leap," I said. "Yet observe." Holmes pointed to a broken crate beneath the ladder, its splinters fresh. He stood upon this, reached the rung, climbed. The crate was then kicked away. See the scuff marks. From the roof he could cross to the next building, descend by the fire escape in Lombard Street, and vanish into the city's arteries. He measured the distance from manhole to crate. 3 strides. From crate to wall, 1. The timing fitted the 12-minute window between shot and discovery. "But the bolt," I objected, "thrown from inside the study." Holmes's smile was grim. "A silk thread, Watson, looped through the keyhole, drawn from the passage. The panel closes, the thread is pulled free. Child's play for a man with ice in his veins." He scraped moss from the mortar of the false panel. Beneath faint scratches, locksmith's marks. Our murderer has a key, or the skill to forge one, and he knows the firm's secrets as intimately as its partners. As we emerged into Threadneedle Street, the first costermongers were setting up their barrows. The ravens wheeled overhead, cawing like witnesses. Holmes paused beneath the firm's brass plate, his gaze distant. 3 facts, Watson. First, the murderer entered and departed through the tunnel, yet left no trace of return. Second, he is a sailor or affects a sailor's habits. Third, he has access to the building's hidden ways. Eliminate the impossible, and whatever remains must be a member of Coutts and Vale, I finished, the chill returning despite the rising sun. Holmes clapped me on the shoulder. "Precisely. The fox is in the henhouse and the hounds are within. Come, we have a ledger to decipher and a ghost named Josiah Hargrove to lay." Chapter 4. The locked study back at 221B. The fire had sunk to embers, yet the room crackled with Holmes's restless energy. He had thrown off his ulster and now paced in his shirt sleeves, the Ledyard ledger open upon the table like a dissected corpse. I poured coffee, strong, black Turkish, while he arranged objects in a semicircle. The Webley, the blackmail note, a length of silk thread, a brass door key borrowed from Vale, and the scrap of waxed twine from the tunnel. "Timeline, Watson," he said, chalking the slate we kept for such purposes. 11:15 p.m. Ebenezer locks himself in to balance the trust accounts. 11:27. Muffled report heard by neighbors. Midnight. Vale and the charwoman break the door. 12 minutes for murder, staging, and escape. We shall reconstruct. He positioned me at the desk, the Webley loaded with a blank cartridge pressed to my temple. You are Ebenezer. I am the intruder. The door, our sitting room door standing in for the study, was fitted with a common mortise lock and an iron bolt. Holmes closed it, shot the bolt, then stepped into the bedroom passage, our tunnel. I heard the soft snick of the false panel, then silence. At 11:27 precisely, a muffled pop, the blank. I slumped forward as a dying man might. Through the keyhole, I glimpsed a gloved hand pass a loop of silk thread, hook it round the bolt's knob, and draw it smoothly across. The bolt clicked home. The thread was withdrawn. The key turned from outside. Total time, 47 seconds. Holmes re-entered, stopwatch in hand. Child's play. The murderer needed only to fire, stage the suicide, lock from the passage, and depart. The thread leaves no trace. The key is his own, or a duplicate. I examined the bolt. Yet the charwoman swore it was thrown before the shot. Memory is treacherous under shock. She heard the bolt at 11:15, Ebenezer securing himself. The second click at 11:27 was masked by the report. The mind blends them. He took up the ledger. Now the motive. The payments to J.H. on a 500 monthly for 2 years. 12,000 vanished into Whitechapel. Ebenezer's marginal note, he knows, written in sepia after the blackmail arrived. He recognized the hand. I turned the pages. The trust's ostensible purpose was slum clearance, yet the expenditures were vague. Sundry repairs, labor, contingencies. One entry caught my eye, 10 oct. 5,000 to J.H. for silence, Blackwall Wharf. Blackwall, near the tunnel's river exit. Holmes's eyes gleamed. Blackmail within blackmail. Hargrove discovered the fraud, demanded payment. When Ebenezer threatened exposure, Hargrove, or his agent, struck. He produced a city map, tracing the tunnel's course with a pencil. From the stationer's cellar it runs beneath 3 buildings, emerges at the old Blackwall stairs. A boat at high tide could carry a man to Limehouse in minutes. Our sailor has a craft. I recalled the wax twine. Navy issue, a man-o'-war's boatswain perhaps. Or a Thames lighterman. The knot craft is the same. Holmes suddenly seized the Webley, sniffed the barrel. Curious, the powder is fresh, yet the cartridge case shows pitting. Old ammunition. Ebenezer kept his revolver loaded for years. The round fired was not from his drawer. He ejected the spent case, held it to the light. Military issue 1876, and here. He pointed to a faint scratch on the primer. A cipher mark. Naval Ordnance Stores. The door burst open. Mrs. Hudson pale as milk. Mr. Holmes. Another note, pushed beneath the street door. The paper was identical. Cream-laid coffin sketch. The message in the same vanishing ink. The doctor knows too much. Midnight at Blackwall. Holmes's laugh was soft. Our murderer grows bold. He mistakes curiosity for complicity. Watson, your revolver, loaded this time. We accept the invitation. Chapter 5. The ciphered ledger. The afternoon post brought no second corpse, yet the air in 221B felt charged as though the very wallpaper awaited the next knock. Holmes had not slept. The chemical corner reeked of iodine and burnt paper, and the table was a battlefield of ledgers, cipher wheels, and coffee dregs. I had spent the morning at the War Office, verifying naval records, fruitlessly. The mark on the cartridge case was indeed ordnance, but the batch had been issued to half the fleet in '76. Holmes greeted my return with a triumphant flourish of the ledgered ledger. The trust is a sieve, Watson. $47,000 unaccounted in 5 years. The payments to J.H. are but the visible leak. Beneath lies a cistern of fraud. He opened the book to a double-page spread. Columns of figures marched in Ebenezer's crabbed hand, yet every 10th entry bore marginalia in brown sepia, tiny, hurried symbols, 12, 500, 5M. Beside each, a single letter, V, F, or H. Visionaire cipher, Holmes announced. The symbols are planetary, astrological shorthand used by Renaissance bankers. The keyword will be personal to Ebenezer. His wife's portrait in the study, her name? Harriet, I recalled. Died in childbirth, 79. Too long. Try the merger, bearings. He aligned his cipher wheel. Using BARINGS, the symbols resolved into gibberish. He tried LEDYARD. Still nonsense. Then softly, the dog. Dog? Ebenezer's spaniel buried in the garden at Hampstead, name on the stone, Dickens. The wheel spun, the first symbol 12 became JH 500. 500 became Vale 250. 5M became Finch 2500. I stared. Vale and Finch, partners in the fraud? Junior partner and head clerk. The H is Hargrove. Blackmail share. V and F siphoned the rest. Ebenezer discovered the rot and confronted them. The blackmail note was Vale's panic, or Finch's. Holmes turned to the final page, the last entry in fresh ink. 15 knocked. JH demands 10M or exposes all. Meeting Blackwall midnight. Ebenezer intended to pay Hargrove off, then expose the others, Holmes said. But Hargrove or his agent arrived early through the tunnel and silenced him. He produced a fresh sheet, copied the marginalia, and held it to the spirit lamp. Hidden text bloomed between the lines. Tunnel key with F-safe combination 18 to 2436. Finch has the duplicate key, I said. He could enter at will. Holmes was already at the telegraph pad. A wire to Lestrade. Detain Mr. Finch, Coots, and Vale for questioning. Do not. Alarm. Another to Vale. Meet us Blackwall Stairs, 11 p.m. Bring trust deeds. The fog returned with dusk, thicker than before, swallowing the street lamps whole. We dined early, cold beef, pickles, a bottle of bone. Then Holmes packed his dark lantern, a coil of rope, and the Webley. I checked my own revolver, slipped a box of cartridges into my pocket. At 10 o'clock, we took a growler to the river. The tide was ebbing. Blackwall Stairs ran slick with weed and refuse. A lighterman's skiff lay moored to a ring, its painter new. Holmes examined the knot, clove hitch, tarred hemp. Sailor's work, he murmured. Our man is punctual. We concealed ourselves behind a pile of coal sacks. The bells of Greenwich struck 11. Footsteps on the stairs, light, hurried. A figure in a yachting ulster, cap peaked low. He carried a black bag, the same that had vanished in the tunnel. Holmes's hand tightened on my arm. Wait. The man knelt by the skiff, opened the bag. Inside, bundles of banknotes, a second Webley, and a ledger identical to the Ledyard, but bound in blue. Finch, I whispered. Before Holmes could move, a second figure descended, tall, limping, a scarf about his face. The limp matched the hobnail prints. He carried a boathook. Money first, the newcomer rasped. Finch straightened. Where's Hargrove? Dead. Drowned, like he deserved. The tunnel's mine now. Finch laughed, high, nervous. You think I'd meet you alone? He drew the Webley. The money's marked. You'll hang, sailor. The boathook flashed. Finch fired, wide. The shot echoed across the water. Holmes sprang, rope uncoiling. The sailor turned, boathook raised, but I was upon him, revolver at his temple. Drop it, I ordered. He complied. Holmes bound his wrists while Finch, white-faced, babbled, He attacked me. I came to pay Hargrove. Liar, Holmes said coldly. You forged the blackmail, used the tunnel, murdered Ebenezer to silence him. The sailor is your tool. The prisoner spat. Tool, am I? Finch promised me half the trust, then tried to cheat me. Holmes examined the blue ledger. Its pages mirrored the Ledyard. Same fraud, but with Finch's initials on every page. You kept a second set, Finch, insurance against Vale. But Ebenezer found both. Finch sagged. Vale was skimming too. I had to act. Holmes signaled the river police launch that had ghosted in on the tide. As Finch was led away, the sailor, name of Josiah Kellett, late Royal Navy, fixed Holmes with a defiant stare. "Hargrove's alive," he said. "Hiding in Limehouse. Opium den, Blue Anchor. He'll gut you for this." Holmes smiled. "Then we shall gut him first." Chapter 6. The Silent Witness. The Blue Anchor lay in the warren of Limehouse Causeway, a low den whose signboard had once shown a golden anchor but now displayed only a smear of soot and birdlime. The fog here was not the honest yellow of the city, but a greenish vapor that rose from the river and carried the stink of opium, tar, and rotting fish. We left the cab at West India Dock Road and proceeded on foot, Holmes in a pea jacket and muffler, I in my old army greatcoat. My revolver weighed heavy in the pocket. Holmes carried only his stick and the dark lantern. The den's door was a slab of teak studded with iron nails. A slit opened at our knock, revealing a single Chinese eye. Holmes murmured something in Cantonese, learned, I later discovered, from a lascar in the docks, and a coin changed hands. We descended a stair that reeked of joss sticks and unwashed humanity. The cellar was a cavern of shadows. Mattresses of straw lined the walls, each occupied by a dreamer lost to the pipe. Lanterns of colored glass cast blood-red and jade-green pools across the floor. A boy, no more than 10, barefoot, face smeared with grime, darted between the bunks, refilling lamps with treacle-thick opium. Holmes crouched beside him. "You are Tommy Pike, called Matches by the lighterman." The boy flinched, but Holmes produced a florin. "Information, not trouble. A man with a limp smells of ink, carries a black bag." "When did he pass?" Tommy's eyes gleamed. "3 nights back, Gov. Came down the tunnel from the river, face like death. Gave me a shilling to keep mum, said he'd cut me if I squeaked." "Tunnel?" I asked. The boy pointed to a bamboo screen at the rear. "Old drain to the foreshore. Smugglers used it afore the police walled it. He opened it with a key, brass, long shank." Holmes flipped the coin. Tommy caught it deftly. "Show us." We followed through the screen into a brick throat scarcely wider than a coffin. The air was foul with rat droppings and the sweet rot of the Thames at low tide. 20 paces in, the passage widened into a chamber where crates stamped Wiggins and Sons were stacked like a barricade. A single candle stump guttered on a barrel. Upon the barrel lay a sailor's ditty bag, open. Inside, a bottle of gallic acid, a penknife, a coil of silk thread, and a sheet of cream-laid paper. The message, still wet: "The doctor dies tonight." Holmes's jaw tightened. "He was here after Blackwall. Kellett lied. Hargrove is the puppet master." Footprints in the dust, hobnail, left heel worn, led to a pile of sacking. Holmes lifted it. Beneath lay a trapdoor, iron-ringed, newly oiled. He hauled it open. Stone steps descended into darkness, and a draft of cold river air struck our faces. "The main tunnel," Holmes whispered. "From here to Coots and Vale in 12 minutes. Hargrove has been living beneath their feet." We descended. The steps ended in a vaulted sewer, its brick arches black with centuries of soot. A narrow ledge ran along the effluent channel. The tide had turned and the water lapped hungrily at our boots. Holmes's lantern picked out details. A chalk arrow pointing cityward, a scrap of waxed twine, and fresh indigo ink splashed across the wall in frantic script. "Finch betrayed me." Vale next. "Hargrove knows Finch is taken," I said. "He's running." "Or hunting." Holmes's voice was grim. "Vale is alone at Threadneedle Street with the deeds. If Hargrove reaches him before Lestrade..." We ran. The ledge was treacherous, slick with algae and the bloated corpses of rats. My breath rasped. Holmes moved like a greyhound. At one point, the tunnel branched. Holmes chose left without hesitation, following the ink splashes. After what seemed miles, iron rungs ascended to a familiar manhole, the alley behind Coates and Vale. We emerged into night. The fog had returned, thicker than ever, swallowing sound. The firm's rear door stood ajar, the lock forced. Holmes drew his revolver, a small tranter kept for emergencies, and we slipped inside. The passage was silent save for the tick of the office clock. We climbed the back stair to the partner's floor. Ebenezer's study door hung open. The chalk outline glowed faintly in the moonlight. Upon the desk lay the Ledyard deeds, torn and ink-spattered. A single boot print, hobnail, marred the blotter. Holmes knelt, still wet. He was here minutes ago. A groan from the corridor. We found Vale in his private office, bound to his chair with picture cord, a gag of legal tape across his mouth. His eyes were wide with terror. Holmes cut him free. "Hargrove," Vale gasped. "He had a knife, said I'd framed him, that Finch and I ruined him. He took the merger papers, evidence to ruin us both." "Where did he go?" Holmes demanded. "Roof. There's a skylight to the stationers. He'll cross to Lombard Street." We raced upward. The attic stair ended in a hatch. Holmes thrust it open. Cold air and fog poured in. We climbed onto the leads. The city's rooftops stretched like a black sea, chimneys jutting like masts. A figure limped across the parapet of the next building, black bag swinging. Holmes cupped his hands. "Hargrove, the game is up." The man turned. Moonlight glinted on a naval cutlass. He laughed, a sound like breaking glass, and vanished over the edge. We followed leaping gaps that yawned above courtyards 30 feet below. My army training served. Holmes's reach and balance were superhuman. At the third roof, we cornered him atop the stationer's dome. Hargrove's face was gaunt, eyes sunken, the limp pronounced. Ink stained his cuffs indigo. "You've cost me everything," he snarled. "Clerk to beggar because of their greed." Holmes advanced, revolver steady. "You murdered Ebenezer to silence him. He was the worst, promised me a partnership, then cast me out for their thefts. The trust was my creation." He lunged. Holmes sidestepped. The cutlass rang on the dome. I tackled Hargrove from behind. We grappled, sliding on the wet lead. His strength was demonic, opium and despair. The cutlass rose. I twisted, felt the blade slice my sleeve. Then Holmes's stick cracked across Hargrove's wrist. The weapon clattered away. Constables swarmed from the fire escape, Lestrade at their head. Hargrove was bound, still cursing. As they led him down, he fixed Holmes with a stare of pure hate. "The secrets die with me," he spat. Holmes smiled thinly. "Secrets, Mr. Hargrove, are like ink. Apply heat, and they always reappear." Chapter 7. The second death dawn found us back in Threadneedle Street, the fog burned off by a pale, reluctant sun. Hargrove was in the cells at Bishopsgate, raving of tunnels and coffins. Finch had been removed to the Bridewell, yet the case felt unfinished, like a melody ending on a discord. Holmes stood in Ebenezer's study, hands clasped behind his back, staring at the chalk outline as though it might speak. "The second note," he said at last. "The one pushed beneath our door. The doctor dies tonight." Hargrove was on the roof at that hour, surrounded by constables. "Who wrote it?" I had no answer. The cream-laid paper lay upon the blotter, the message now fully developed by the morning light. "Your secrets are mine. Pay or perish." The coffin beneath was empty, no tiny corpse this time. Holmes lifted the sheet to the window. "Observe the watermark, J. Whatman, 1888. The same as the first note, yet the paper is fresher. Hargrove used old stock from the stationer's cellar. This sheet came from the firm's own supply cupboard." A constable entered, cap in hand. "Beg pardon, Mr. Holmes. Inspector Lestrade sends word. Another death. Mr. Reginald Vale's clerk, Mr. Percival Finch, found hanged in his garret in Clerkenwell. Suicide, they say. Note pinned to his coat." Holmes's eyes narrowed to slits. "Suicide? How convenient. Watson the handsome." The garret was a mean attic above a chandler's shop in Ironmonger Row. The air stank of tallow and despair. Finch dangled from a roof beam, his boots 6 inches above a toppled stool. His face was purple, tongue protruding. The rope was new hemp, tarred, the knot a perfect clove hitch. Upon his breast, pinned with a brass nib, a single sheet. "I cannot live with the secret." Lestrade stood beneath the corpse, arms akimbo. "Same as Coutts. Door locked from within, window latched. Neighbors heard nothing. The man was alone." Holmes examined the knot. Nautical, yet Finch was a city clerk. Born in Cheapside, never saw a ship. And this rope, bought yesterday from a ship chandler in Wapping, according to the wrapper in the grate. He knelt by the stool. Scuff marks on the seat, 2 sets. One Finch's patent boots, the other. He scraped the wood. Hobnail, left heel worn. Hargrove's print, yet Hargrove was in custody. I felt the chill return. An accomplice, or a third player. Holmes turned to the note. The ink was indigo, not the vanishing black. Beneath the message, faint pressure marks, writing on a sheet above. He held the paper to the gas jet. Ghost words appeared. Ledyard Trust, Vault 3. "The safe in Vale's office," I said. "Combination 182436 from the ledger." We returned to Coutts and Vale. Vale met us in the hall, his face ashen. "Finch, dead? God help us. He came to me last night, babbling of Hargrove, begging to confess. I sent him home." Holmes's gaze was steel. "You sent him to his death." "Show me the safe." Vault 3 was in the strong room, a squat chub with 3 dials. Holmes spun them, 182436. The door swung open. Inside, bundles of deeds, a velvet box, and an empty space where a blue ledger had rested. "The second set," Holmes murmured. "Finch's insurance, removed after death." He lifted a scrap of paper from the floor. A receipt, $50 to J. Kellett, mariner, for services rendered. Signed R. Vale. Vale paled. "Alone. Finch was in debt." Holmes cut him off. "You paid Kellett to silence Finch. The hanging was staged in Hargrove's style to implicate him." "But you overlooked the ink." He produced Finch's note. "Indigo. Stationer's supply, not the blackmailer's gallic acid. And the pressure marks, written in this room on the desk above the safe." Vale backed away. "You cannot prove—" Holmes's voice was soft. "I can prove the rope was cut from the same coil used to bind you on the roof. Tarred hemp, identical twist. You staged your own abduction, left the door ajar for Hargrove to find, then followed Finch to Clerkenwell. The clove hitch was your flourish, learned on your yacht, the alibi." Lestrade entered with 2 constables. Vale's shoulders sagged. "Ebenezer found the fraud. Finch panicked, hired Kellett. I only wanted to contain it." Holmes turned away. "Contain murder? You opened the vault and let the Thames flood in." As Vale was let out, Holmes stood at the window watching the city stir to life. 2 deaths to bury 1 secret. The trust was a sham. Vale and Finch siphoned funds to cover gambling debts. Ebenezer discovered it, threatened exposure. Finch killed him. Hargrove blackmailed them both. Kellett was the tool. When Finch cracked, Vale silenced him. I asked the question that burned. "And the note to me?" Holmes's smile was wintry. "Vale's last misdirection. If the doctor died, suspicion would fall on Hargrove. But the ink betrayed him. Indigo, not black. A clerk's habit." He closed the safe. "The ledger is gone. Burned, no doubt. But the Bank of England has records. The trust will be wound up. The slums left to rot a little longer." Justice, Watson, is a blunt instrument. Outside, the ravens wheeled above the Royal Exchange, cawing like a jury. The case was closed, yet the taste was bitter. Chapter 8. The Alibi of Smoke. The blue anchor had changed in daylight. The colored lanterns were cold, the straw mattresses rolled away. The air now merely sour instead of narcotic. A constable guarded the door. Lestrade had sealed the opium den, pending charges of unlicensed pipe-keeping. The Chinese proprietor had vanished into the warren of Limehouse, but the boy Tommy Pike remained perched on a crate, swinging bare feet and gnawing a ship's biscuit. Holmes tossed him another florin. The sailor, Kellett. Where did he bunk? Tommy pointed to a curtained alcove. There, Gov. Paid the Chinaman £1 a night. Said he was waiting for a berth to Valparaiso. We drew the curtain. The alcove held a narrow cot, a sea chest, and a spirit stove. Upon the chest lay a ditty bag, identical to the one found in the tunnel, containing a half-empty bottle of gallic acid, a Webley with 3 rounds missing, and a logbook bound in shark skin. Holmes opened it. The last entry in a crabbed naval hand, 15 oct. Paid $50 by RV to silence F. Job done. H. still at large. Blackwall midnight for final split. RV Reginald Vale, I said. He paid Kellett to murder Finch. Holmes turned the page. Earlier entries chronicled the fraud. Dates, sums, meetings in the tunnel. Kellett had been the courier ferrying cash between Vale, Finch, and Hargrove. The final note. Hargrove demands 10 mm or exposes all. Will kill if crossed. Holmes closed the book. Kellett was the hinge. Vale used him to eliminate Finch. Hargrove used him to blackmail. When Finch was hanged, Kellett feared he was next. We found Kellett in the Wapping police court awaiting transport to Brixton. He was a broken man, scarred face, salt-stiff hair, hands trembling from opium withdrawal. The cell smelled of fear and carbolic. Holmes laid the logbook on the bars. Your employer has confessed, Kellett. Vale paid you to stage Finch's suicide. The rope, the clove hitch, your sailor's flourish. Kellett laughed until he coughed. My hands shake too much for knots, Mr. Holmes. Look. He held them out, fingers twitching like trapped moths. Neurasthenia. Caught it in the China Station, 83. Can't tie a reef knot, let alone a clove hitch. I examined his hands. The tremor was genuine. The skin yellowed from laudanum. He could not have tied the noose. Holmes's eyes narrowed. Yet the knot was perfect. Vale's work, Kellett rasped. He's a yachtsman, races at cows. Tied me up once when I threatened to peach, said he'd sink me in the Solent with a cannonball. I believed him. He leaned closer. Finch came to me 2 nights ago here in the den, offered the Blue Ledger for $10,000, said Vale was cutting him out. I refused. Knew Hargrove would kill me. Next day Finch is dead, and Vale's coppers in my pocket. Holmes produced the tarred rope from Finch's garret. You recognize this? Kellett nodded. Cut from the same coil Vale used on me. He keeps a length in his yacht's locker, the alibi. Said it was for emergencies. Holmes turned to Lestrade, who had entered behind us. Release Hargrove. He is innocent of Finch's murder. The true killer sits in Threadneedle Street, polishing his brass plate. We returned to Coutts and Vale. The firm was shuttered, black crepe upon the door. Vale's office was locked, but the duplicate key from the ledger opened it. The room was tidy, too tidy. The desk blotter had been replaced. The safe stood open and empty. Upon the mantel, a silver frame held a photograph. Vale aboard the alibi, smiling, a coil of tarred rope at his feet. Holmes lifted the blotter. Beneath, faint indigo pressure marks. Ledyard Trust, all evidence destroyed. He opened the grate. Ash and a scrap of blue Morocco, Finch's ledger, burned. But one page had survived, curled and blackened. Vale, $25,000 to Bermuda account. The merger with Barings, Holmes said. Vale planned to flee with the spoils, leaving Finch and Hargrove to hang. When Finch threatened exposure, Vale silenced him. I noticed a yachting cap upon the chair. Silk-lined, monogrammed RV. Holmes turned it inside out. The sweatband was stained with indigo ink. Vale wrote the notes himself, I said. The vanishing ink, the coffin sketches, all to implicate Hargrove. Holmes nodded. And the note to you, Watson, written in haste, indigo because his gallic acid was spent. He intended to kill you at Blackwall, pin it on Hargrove, then vanish on the morning tide. He opened the window. Below, in the alley, the false panel stood ajar. Fresh hobnail prints led to the stationer's wall, but this time they returned. Vale staged the prints, Holmes said, used Hargrove's boots from the tunnel cache, but he forgot the return journey. A yachtsman plans his course, but not his retreat. Lestrade burst in with constables. Vale's gone. Took a cab to the docks an hour ago. Holmes was already moving. The alibi sails on the ebb, to Tilbury. We raced through the city, the hensom's wheels striking sparks. The docks were a chaos of cranes and shouting stevedores. The alibi lay at the outer pier, a sleek cutter, sails bent, steam launch alongside. Vale stood on the quarterdeck, ulster flapping, a valise at his feet. Holmes leapt aboard. Reginald Vale, you are under arrest for the murders of Ebenezer Coutts and Percival Finch. Vale's smile was ghastly. Too late, Holmes. The tide waits for no man. He drew a derringer. The launch's engine roared, but Lestrade's men swarmed the pier, rifles raised. Vale fired, wild. Holmes's stick cracked across his wrist. The pistol splashed into the river. As he was bound, Vale laughed. The money is gone, Bermuda. You'll never prove. Holmes held up the charred ledger page. The Bank of England will, and your yacht's log records every passage. The sea keeps its own accounts. The alibi was towed back, Vale to the cells. The case was closed, yet Holmes stood at the rail, watching the gulls wheel above the dirty water. Pride, Watson, he said softly. The most treacherous companion. It whispers that secrets can be buried at sea, yet the tide always returns them. Chapter 9. The final thread. The morning after Vale's arrest, 221B Baker Street was a museum of evidence. The Persian rug had become a map. The Webley, the coil of tarred rope, the charred scrap of blue Morocco, the indigo-stained yachting cap, the silk thread, the gallic acid bottle, the cream-laid paper with its coffin sketch. Holmes moved among them like a chess master arranging the end game, his dressing gown trailing, a cold pipe clenched between his teeth. I entered with the Morning Post. The headline screamed, City Solicitor Arrested, Double Murder in Threadneedle Street. Beneath a smaller item, Ledyard Trust Fraud Exposed, 47,000 vanished. Holmes glanced up. The Bank of England has frozen Vale's Bermuda account. The merger with Barings is dead. The slums will wait another decade for their savior. His tone was flat. Justice without redemption left a bitter taste. He lifted the silk thread. The final thread, Watson. Observe. He looped it through the keyhole of our sitting room door, drew the bolt from the passage side, then withdrew the thread with a single tug. Vale learned the trick from a stage conjurer at the Egyptian Hall. He used it on Ebenezer, then on Finch, locking the garret from without after staging the hanging. I examined the thread. Yet Hargrove's boots made the hobnail prints. Stolen from the tunnel cache, Vale wore them to Blackwall, to the garret, to the roof. He returned them after each journey, except the last. The return prints in the alley betrayed him. Holmes arranged the clues in a line. The chain is complete, Holmes said. Motive, greed and terror of exposure. Opportunity, the tunnel and the keys. Method, the thread, the rope, the staged suicides. He opened the logbook seized from the alibi. Vale's neat hand recorded every payment to Kellett, every meeting in the tunnel. The final entry, 16 oct. F silenced, H to follow, Bermuda 18th. Vale intended to kill Hargrove next, I said, then flee. Holmes nodded. But Hargrove's confession in the cells, naming Vale as the paymaster, sealed his fate. Lestrade has both men now. Kellett will turn Queen's evidence for a reduced sentence. A knock. Mrs. Hudson ushered in Inspector Lestrade, beaming beneath his bowler. Clean as a whistle, Mr. Holmes. Vale's confessed the lot. Ebenezer Finch, the fraud, says he acted alone after Finch panicked. Hargrove was only the blackmailer, never laid a hand on the victims. Holmes's eyebrow arched. And you believe him? Lestrade shifted. Paper trail don't lie. The bank's auditors are tearing the trust apart. Vale's signature on every forged deed. Holmes handed him the silk thread. Then explain this, Inspector. Vale locked Ebenezer's study from the passage. He hanged Finch with his own yacht rope. He wrote the notes in indigo when his gallic acid ran low. Hargrove supplied the boots and the tunnel, but Vale pulled the trigger and the noose. Lestrade pocketed the thread. The yard satisfied. Crown prosecutor too. Trials set for the Old Bailey January. You'll be called, Doctor. After he left, Holmes stood at the window watching the traffic in Baker Street. Satisfied, he repeated softly. Yet the slums remain. The poor will pay the interest on Vale's greed for years. Justice balances the ledger, but never the scales. I asked the question that lingered. The note to me, the doctor dies tonight. Why? Holmes turned. You examined Ebenezer's wound. You noticed the awkward angle. Vale feared you would see the truth before he fled. The note was to lure you to Blackwall, where Kellett waited with the Webley. When you survived, he tried again with the roof abduction, staging his own peril to deflect suspicion. He picked up the coffin sketch. The empty coffin, Vale's signature. He saw himself as the undertaker of secrets. The door opened again. Tommy Pike scrubbed clean in a new suit of dittos. Behind him, a portly gentleman in clerical black. The Reverend Mr. Ledyard, Holmes introduced, true trustee of the Ledyard fortune. He has come to reclaim what remains. The Reverend's eyes were wet. My brother's legacy, stolen by the very men sworn to protect it. The slums he loved will have their houses now. And you, Mr. Holmes, shall name your fee. Holmes waved it away. The restoration of truth is payment enough, though, he glanced at Tommy, a place at Christ's Hospital for this lad. He has earned it. Tommy's grin split his face. Cor Gov, a blue-coat scholar. As they left, Holmes returned to the table. He gathered the clues, placed them in a neat parcel, and tied it with the silk thread. The final thread, he said, snipped. Chapter 10. The Mirror of Motive. The Old Bailey in January is a cavern of oak and echo where the breath of the condemned mingles with the dust of centuries. Reginald Vale stood in the dock, pale but composed, his solicitor's gown replaced by prison gray. The gallery was packed. City magnates, Whitechapel costermongers, reporters with notebooks poised like bayonets. Holmes and I sat behind the counsel for the Crown. Lestrade preened in the witness box, mustache waxed to needle points. The prosecution's case was a tapestry woven from the clues we had gathered. The silk thread, the tarred rope, the indigo ink, the charred ledger, the Bermuda account. Vale's confession, extracted after 3 sleepless nights in the cells, filled the gaps. Yet as the clerk read the indictment, I felt the old unease. Justice is a machine. It grinds but does not always heal. Holmes leaned close. Observe the jury, Watson. 3 bankers, 2 clergymen, a retired admiral. Vale's fate was sealed the moment the slums were mentioned. The first witness was Hargrove, gaunt, shackled yet defiant. He recounted the fraud's birth, Vale and Finch siphoning the Ledyard Trust to cover gambling debts at the Corinthian Club. Ebenezer's discovery, the blackmail notes. Hargrove's work, yes, but never meant to kill. I wanted them ruined, not dead, he rasped. Vale did the killing. Kellett followed, trembling from withdrawal. He described the tunnel meetings, the 50 payments, the clove hitch Vale tied around his own wrists as a warning. He said the sea forgives nothing, Kellett whispered. I believed him. Then Vale himself took the stand. The man who had once glided through Threadneedle Street now clutched the rail as though it were a spar in a storm. I did not mean to kill Ebenezer, he began, voice steady. He laughed at the note, said he'd see me in the dock first. The pistol was in my hand before I knew it. Finch panicked, hired Kellett. When Finch threatened to confess, He swallowed. I silenced him. The rope was from the alibi. I tied it myself. The Admiral Juror gasped. A yachtsman hanging a man with his own rope. Unspeakable. Holmes was called last. He spoke quietly, yet every word carried to the rafters. He demonstrated the silk thread through a mock keyhole, drew the bolt with a single tug. He held up the charred ledger page, the indigo-stained cap, the coffin sketch. The murderer's signature, he said. Pride. He believed secrets could be buried like treasure. Yet ink, like blood, always rises. The jury retired for 19 minutes, guilty on both counts. The black cap descended. The sentence was death. Afterward, in the echoing corridor, the Reverend Mr. Ledyard approached. The trust is reborn, Mr. Holmes. The first houses rise in Whitechapel come spring. Your fee— Holmes raised a hand. Give it to the boy Tommy Pike. A scholarship is a surer legacy than gold. We emerged into a cold, clear afternoon. The fog had lifted for good. The city sparkled under frost. A newsboy thrust a late edition at us. Ledyard Trust redeemed, slums to be rebuilt. Holmes paused beneath the Royal Exchange, watching the ravens wheel. A mirror, Watson. Vale saw his reflection in the coffin sketch. Empty, waiting. He filled it with bodies to save his pride. I asked the question that had haunted me. Was there no other way? Holmes's smile was sad. The law is a blunt saw. It cuts the limb but cannot mend the tree. Yet the slums will have their houses. That is something. We walked home through streets alive with hope. Children played in the gutters. A costermonger's barrow overflowed with hot chestnuts. At 221B, Mrs. Hudson had laid a fire and a telegram. Christ's Hospital accepts T. Pike. Gratitude eternal. Reverend L. Holmes tossed his ulster across the chair. The game is played out, Watson. The board is clear. I poured sherry. To the mirror of motive, I toasted. Holmes raised his glass. And to the light that shatters it. Outside, the gas lamps flickered on, one by one. London breathed, wounded but healing. The secrets were buried at last, not in the Thames but in the foundations of new homes.